Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We're thrilled to have you all here at our inaugural State of Our Families event. Please continue to enjoy your lunch as we begin this program. And we're honored to have a panel of incredible community leaders join us, as well as Autumn Phillips, the editor-in-chief at the Post-Courier, who will be serving as our moderator. And thank you all so much for taking the time to be here. Also, thank you, our panelists, for sharing your knowledge with all of us. I know I am excited to learn from you and what we're going to be talking about. I'd also like to thank our presenting sponsors, whose generosity helped make this event possible. You'll see them up on the screen: the College of Charleston, Cummins, Elliott Davis, Humana, Life Cycle Engineering, Santee Cooper, and Trident Technical College. In addition to that, I'd like to thank our impact sponsor, the Intertech Group, as well as our table sponsors, Forvis, Home Telecom, Ingevity, South State Bank, and United Bank. Today, we are here to talk about the state of our families in the Tri-County area. We're going to hear from our community leaders on stage and learn a bit about what they know, what programs they've seen to be successful, and what their thoughts are on how we as a community can increase our own impact and support for our friends and our neighbors. Like you, I'm also here to listen. And before we get started, I'd like to share what I know to be true about our Tri-County families with the hopes that this information can be a frame for the discussions we're about to have. And so this is not a typo on the screen. In our Tri-County area, roughly 40% of households, that's 128,000 households, live on the verge of financial instability and struggle to make ends meet. Many more have a hard time covering their basic needs, as the cost of living has far outpaced increases in earnings. You can see on the slide we're referring to these households that are under the ALICE threshold. But who the heck is ALICE? In our Tri-County area, a family of four making $60,000 or less is often just one medical bill, one car repair, one emergency away from financial disaster. For these families, the sudden loss of childcare could trigger the loss of a job, or a major unplanned expense can derail an entire month of well-planned activities and expenses. Having to decide between repairing your car, which we know you need to get to work, or paying a medical bill is an impossible choice, and yet so many of our neighbors face this decision every day. This is especially important when you think that the average ALICE household has less than $500 in savings. ALICE is an acronym that you see up on the screen. It stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. And it's a new way of defining and understanding the struggles of households that earn above the federal poverty line, but not enough to afford our basic necessities. These are the families of four I just mentioned that are making $60,000 or less per year. And I have a short video we'd like to share that will give a little bit more context into ALICE and what it means here in the Tri-County.
This is ALICE, and this is ALICE, and this is ALICE too. ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed, and represents working households earning above the federal poverty level, yet not enough to afford all of life's basic necessities. Despite often working two or more jobs, ALICE is forced to make impossible decisions, like choosing between quality childcare or rent that month. Just one unexpected expense can become a major financial crisis, plunging families into poverty. In our Tri-County, nearly 1 in 3 households are ALICE. These are people and families you probably know: your cashier at the grocery store, your child's daycare teacher, your grandmother's home nurse. They're your friends, neighbors, and the workers who keep the Tri-County running. ALICE, we see you. Trident United Way is paving the way to financial stability for the ALICE population, connecting them to immediate relief while opening opportunities to thrive. But this work can't be done alone. We all need to come together to support ALICE, whether that means donating, volunteering, partnering with Trident United Way, or educating others about ALICE and community resources available. You may not know who exactly in your community is struggling, but you can know this: your help will make a difference in their lives, in your life, and in all our lives. Because united, we thrive.
As you saw, we know these families. In fact, many of us are these families. And we believe it is our work to really lift up and tell that story. What's interesting about these is many of these families are employed, and we're going to talk about that in just a second in the stats. They have multiple jobs or they're living paycheck to paycheck without any real financial cushion to fall back on in an emergency. Again, less than $500 in household savings. Unfortunately, the number of Alice families is growing, not just here in our community, but across the country. We went back and kind of looked at the data here, and about 20 years ago, it was about 23, 24% of the population, adjusting costs for the times. We're in that Alice threshold. Today, it's closer to 40. It has been slowly growing, and it's time we shine a light on it. While nearly half of our neighbors are struggling to cover their basic needs, for communities of color, it's even harder. There's an additional burden of systemic inequities and disparate financial recovery post-COVID, which has kept many from attaining or regaining the financial stability they may have had before the pandemic. It's unacceptable, and it's something we as a community should not ignore. And so this Alice population gets often overlooked because they don't fit the traditional category of what we would consider to be a person in poverty. They're not unhoused, and they're not receiving government assistance. But make no mistake, they're facing tremendous financial hardship every day. In the Tri-County area, so far this year, the top need, or our request for assistance into our 211 line, has been rent payment assistance. It was up 47% compared to the first 6 months of last year. It totaled 1,617 calls in the first half of the year. This was also not only the category that had the most calls, but also the category that had the largest increase in percentage of calls. The second highest request was for electric service payment assistance at 1,239 calls. What's also interesting is if we look not just at housing assistance, but all of the factors in housing, 211 received a total of 3,200 calls related to housing in our community. Rent assistance, I just mentioned as the top need, but also inquiries about affordable housing, shelters, landlord-tenant assistance, and homelessness prevention programs. What's shocking, though, is the statistics of who these people are who are calling. 71.6% of callers identified as Black or African American. 76% identified as female. 36% had some source of employment, of which 27% were employed full-time. 1 in 3 were employed. Let's be clear, they're not just statistics. These are real people, real lives, real stories. These are the parents who are working multiple jobs just to put food on their table. These are the children who are going to bed hungry because there's simply not enough to go around. These are children who are working to just learn. They're also seniors who's forced to choose between paying their medications or paying their utility bills. At Trident United Way, we believe that everyone deserves that opportunity to thrive. That's why we're working hard to support Alice families in our community. One of the ways we're doing this is by partnering with local organizations. Like many of the organizations here with us today, and that are up on the screen, they provide direct assistance to families in need, and we're so proud of the work we're doing in collaboration and partnership with all of them. For example, we work with local food banks to provide food to those who may be struggling to feed their families. We also work with organizations that provide emergency financial assistance to families facing an unexpected crisis, like medical bills, call repairs, or even evictions. We have 2 resource connection centers we're very proud of, one in Berkeley County and one in Dorchester County. These centers bring together more than 10 local nonprofit service providers that help individuals and families in those counties with housing, utilities, food, healthcare, childcare services, senior services, and so much more. And within our Berkeley County Resource Connection Center, we just launched the Food Share Berkeley County program, which is powered by Trident United Way and sponsored by one of our incredible corporate leaders, Nucor. Food Share offers fresh food boxes every other week, which are filled with a variety of healthy fruits and vegetables at very affordable prices. For those of you who work in food insecurity, you know food is medicine. Boxes are generally valued at around $40 and can be purchased with SNAP benefits for $5. Or with a credit card and debit card can be for $20 for someone who does not have SNAP. We believe making this available to everyone in the community in the hope of making fresh, healthy foods more available and affordable for so many families on the edge. Another way we're supporting Alice families is by advocating for policies that will make a difference in their lives. For example, we support policies that would increase access to affordable health care, affordable housing, and child care. We also support policies that would increase the minimum wage to a living wage so that families can earn enough to support themselves and their loved ones. We know that supporting Alice families is not just about providing direct assistance or advocating for policy changes. It's about simply recognizing the very real struggles of hardworking families in our communities and thinking about actions, large or small, that we can lend a hand as a community to them. We know that the challenges facing Alice families are complex, and there's no single solution that will solve everything. but we also know that we cannot afford to ignore this issue any longer. We should come together as a community to support Alice families in any way we can. We must recognize their hardships, which are often so invisible to so many. And we must commit ourselves to building a community where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So I urge you all to join us in this important work. Donate your time, your resources, your voice to support these Alice families. Let's work together to create a community where everyone has the opportunity to achieve financial stability, financial mobility, and a healthy, happy life. And if you're a company seeking to help lower the barriers of economic mobility for your employees, Trident United Way is here to support you in your efforts. Please reach out to us. We'd be happy to see what that could look like and brainstorm and help find a path forward. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit tuw.org/Alice. And if you have questions right now, feel free to submit them via the QR code that is on your table. We'll have a brief Q&A session after our panel discussion. We may not be able to answer every question or comment, but if your question is not answered here today, someone from our team will follow up with you individually over the next several days and get you an answer. And I just want to say thank you for your time. I look forward to working with you all to support our Alice families. And now, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome our board chair, Mark Lewis. Mark is a longtime friend and supporter of Trident United Way. He served on our executive committee, finance committee, audit committee, and advancement committee. He has given countless hours to our community as a volunteer, and he is currently the interim and fractional CFO at TechCXO. Mark, thank you so much for being here and for all that you do and continue to support our community. It's been such a pleasure and honor working with and learning from you.
Thank you, DJ. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's my honor this morning to introduce you to and tell you a little bit about our moderator, Autumn Phillips. Actually, it's more than just a little bit, as she has a very impressive background. Autumn has recently taken the position of editor-in-chief at the Post-and-Courier. Prior to this role, she held the titles of executive editor and managing editor. Before coming to Charleston in 2018, she worked at Lee Enterprises, serving as executive editor for a number of news outlets across the country, including Colorado, Arizona, Texas, Idaho, Illinois, and Iowa. Autumn is a native of Wyoming. From late 2011 to early 2012, she spent 4 months traveling independently to Ethiopia, which she documented on her blog, Autumn in Ethiopia. At Post-and-Courier, she's led the newsroom's daily activities and overseen major initiatives, including Rising Waters, the climate change series that was named a Pulitzer Prize finalist. In her new role as editor-in-chief, she'll oversee philanthropic fundraising and a new venture for the publication where she will lead readers on international trips, which combines her love of travel and writing. I can't think of anybody more qualified to lead this very important discussion today. Autumn, thank you so much for being here.
So, we got here about an hour early for sound check, etc. And over the last hour, we've sat at that table talking about the issues in our community and what we can do to solve them as a group and individually. And there was a moment when we were deep in the conversation, and I don't know if this ever happens to you, but I felt my chest, tightening. I felt myself welling up. I was so inspired by what they're doing and the way everyone's thinking. So at the paper, and in my life, I spend a lot of time thinking, how do you make a difference in the world? Is it informing yourself, collecting data, and then what do you do with it once you're informed? Do you give a lot to many organizations, or do you focus on one issue? Anyway, so today as we talk, think about that question. How do you make a difference? Everyone in this room is here because we're trying to change the world. If there are concrete things that you can offer that we can leave this room with today. All right, so on our panel, we have Pastor Byron Benton, Senior Pastor at Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. Thank you for being here. We have Matt Brady, now Economic Development Manager at the town of Mount Pleasant. We have Shawan Gillians, Director of Sustainability for Santee Cooper. And we have Melissa Levesque, Chief Strategy Officer at Coastal Community Foundation. So let's start by playing off the things DJ said about our Alice families. Let's talk about affordable housing. We have in the Post and Courier an occasional series called Priced Out, which is really about how rents have skyrocketed over the last couple years, and this is less and less affordable for so many people, for 40% of our community. We wrote a story about how people in their 30s have to have roommates, about how teachers are moving out of the community, and about how good students with good grades are dropping out of college because they can't pay their bills. Calls to, I was looking at the numbers DJ shared, the calls to 211 asking for help with rent assistance in the Tri-County went up 47% last year. Rents last year in Mount Pleasant and Charleston jumped by 30%. So let's start with Pastor Benton. In your work with the church, you often serve as a counselor and confidant to many families in our community. Taking a broad view, what are you seeing as the most pressing issues facing families right now? What obstacles or hardships are the most common and most critical? Is it housing?
One, thank you for this forum and the attention that's being brought to it, and just the invitation to speak into this space. It's a deep honor. All of the above I'm seeing because it all boils down to economics. If you don't have enough money, then housing is a problem, food is a problem, transportation is a problem, health is a problem. You can't afford to get sick. But one thing I would say that what I see more commonly is the issue of housing because it affects all ages. I'll do 3 quick stories and pass it on. This year, I've had a senior who wrote a note to me in desperation saying my rent's gone up 3 times in the last 2 years, and I'm on a fixed income. I don't know what to do. Had another member, mother and daughter living together. Daughter is an adult, working full-time, night shift, in school, here at Trident during the day. Mother gets sick. No longer can they afford rent. They get mother in a facility that can take care of her. Daughter goes to begin living in her car. Didn't know that at the time, but once we found out, we began working. We helped daughter get another job. Really had to coach and counsel her through this because also there's trauma that then you experience as a result of all of this. There's depression. There's a whole mental health component that begins to happen. Over and over, we see individuals who have to become caregivers, either for their children who get sick or for aging parents or for a spouse who gets sick and can no longer work. As soon as that happens and you are already living on the edge of being able to afford your monthly bills, now you are in a catastrophic problem. And housing, where you can afford to live, also dictates what kind of other support factors are around you. Is there a daycare nearby if you have young children? If you had to move far out, there may not be a daycare, and you're far enough away from your job to how do you get there by 6 o'clock to pick up your kid? Or when you have kids that have to then go to after school, you run into the same thing. So what I'm experiencing and seeing is an avalanche that begins to happen on people because one thing domino affects another, and now how do we deal with that individually when it's a whole system that needs to be dealt with in order to provide the right kind of support?
This is kind of a follow-up question, from your place at the church or our place. Whose responsibility is it when our community is hurting?
All of ours.
Yeah.
I believe in the African proverb, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. And so this ontology of connection, Martin Buber's theology, the Spirit emerges from the I and thou. It's how we, in connection with each other, form identity by supporting one another. And that's the reason why we have the different entities. That's why nonprofit exists. That's why religious sector exists. That's why we have government that exists that can implement policies and address things and make sure there's equity and seeing where the gaps are and that tax dollars are being used to actually benefit the taxpayers in a way that really causes all the boats to rise and not just certain ones to rise. All those different things. So what I would say, it is everyone. Everybody has a role in how we support and love our neighbor well.
Good answer. All right, Matt Brady. In your career, you've gained a broad view of the Tri-County. You were Economic Development Director of Goose Creek for 5 years. You're the current Economic Development Manager of Mount Pleasant, a newly created position, and you serve on the North Charleston Planning Committee. What's interesting to me about your post, you're tasked with encouraging business growth in Mount Pleasant, but that's a multifaceted task. You have to calibrate the growth with what we were talking about with workforce housing. So when you think about both of those things, how does transportation factor in? How are local governments looking at this issue in relation to jobs? And what can you tell us about what is in the works and what needs to be done?
Sure, thank you. It's my luck to follow an eloquent pastor. But when you think about physical mobility, it's a key component of economic mobility. And so talking about transportation, we think of it as a workforce development, economic development issue. So at the town, of course, a lot of the folks who would be considered ALICE that are in the workforce of Mount Pleasant don't live in Mount Pleasant. They live in Goose Creek, North area, Moncks Corner, other parts of our region, and have to find a way to get into town. So as a local government, we work closely with CARTA, of course. We have a couple of our electeds on the board. And we're starting to do some things right now to understand how routes and schedules and things like that could change with CARTA. We're working with employers on these issues too, because they are the closest to their workforce. So we've recently launched a survey for our small businesses to understand a whole list of things, but transportation's also on there. And in that same breath, I would mention that we've created the East Cooper Hospitality Council that with the Mount Pleasant Chamber that kind of collects all of these businesses that have workers that would rely on public transit. So that's a couple of things that we're doing. But what we're trying to do, and I've heard it in our discussion over at the table, is collect data so that we can make policy decisions based on what we really know. So that's the point of the survey. That's the point of understanding ridership. For instance, Coleman Boulevard, that route doubled in June. So something's going on there, and I don't think it's everybody going to IOP either. So that's one thing. And kind of thinking more regionally about transit, 30,000-foot view, and putting my urban planner hat on, that you want to put housing close to where people work, and you want work to be close to people's where they live. And so what does that mean over the long term, looking at land use rules and increasing densities where appropriate? Y'all don't go tell Mayor Haney, Matt Brady said, we're increasing density in Mount Pleasant, but we look at where it's appropriate, and that allows folks to build not just single family homes, but that missing middle housing that meets a need for people who are particularly vulnerable or young or very old, that doesn't kind of just fit the mold that we think of right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the Low Country Rapid Transit System. It's a game changer for the region. I think it will really increase people's mobility options. And kind of going back to the urban planning stuff, to the city of North Charleston's credit, they have already changed their zoning along that entire LCRT route to allow for essentially unlimited density, if you can park it, a mix of uses, and that kind of forward thinking is what will allow for better transit options. Density makes transit work, and it'll allow for a mix of housing options that will kind of meet the needs of all the folks.
All right, Shawan, your turn. You've dedicated your life to helping people. I know Santee Cooper has programs to help people when they can't afford utilities. I know you've given your volunteer time to food programs, children, higher education, healthcare, philanthropy. What's the common thread you're seeing across that spectrum? How does somebody end up living on the brink of financial ruin? And what can we in this room do to help?
So, Autumn, I think the obvious thread between all of those things are people, right? We're talking about the state of our families, and families are groupings of people. I think we go, I'll maybe kind of answer your question in reverse. I think the first thing that as a community of people who care, we ought to be thinking, ought to be doing, is tearing down the barrier, the labels of them and us. We get very comfortable with the idea of this is something that happens to them, not something that happens to us. But if we're being real honest, all of us are one catastrophe away from financial instability. It's just a question of how large is the catastrophe. For some of us, it is a flat tire. For some of them, it's the complete devastation of losing our home or, the death of the primary breadwinner. But we're all one step away from financial catastrophe. And when we think about that, it allows us to personalize the issue in a way that says, what are the things that would cause me to have problems? If I am making $30,000, if I'm Alice, for me it could be now my car. My car is in the repair shop. Nothing you did to cause that, but yet here we are. Doesn't make you a bad person, because if it happened to me, I wouldn't be a bad person. If I suddenly decided I couldn't walk in heels and I fall off this stage and I break an ankle, it will be painful, because broken ankles are painful, I understand. What it's not going to be is painful for me, because when I arrive at the hospital, I'm afraid that I don't have adequate health insurance, or that even if I do, I don't have adequate income to cover hospital bills, even with health insurance. So all of those things are part of the makeup of what people need. 211, you heard DJ mention, and we've heard several times, that rent and utilities are the big drivers. Those are the things that people are calling about. Now, I work for an electric and water utility, and we hear amongst ourselves, we are the lowest cost provider in X region. And all of that is great. One thing that Santee Cooper has recently taken to doing that I'm very proud of is considering affordability. Because who cares if you are the lowest amongst a whole bunch of people who are unaffordable? You want to be affordable for the people that you are serving. And so that's what we're looking at, and I think it's affordability. But quite frankly, we also need jobs. We need jobs that allow people to not have to work 12 hours a day to meet basic needs. So those are the ways I think those things tie together.
Melissa, I know economic mobility has been a top area of concern for the Coastal Community Foundation. And you've hosted several educational programs about it. From your efforts, What have you seen move the needle?
Happy to talk about that. Economic mobility is definitely something that we're very focused on. And I loved and agree with the comments made by my colleagues on the panel leading up to me. And one comment that was made that I want to sort of put in context for our economic mobility work is the importance of data. Because we all want to have impact and everybody wants to see what results are you getting. And one thing that we do is we are very intentional in having conversations with community, and we reconcile that information with hard data so you can make some really good decisions. And I know Trident United Way does this. One thing that we've recently done is we've partnered with Coastal Carolina University to host on our website, it's a free resource called the Rising Tide Sustainability Dashboard. We think that there are several areas that are important to have a strong and sustainable community for everybody. This is the community that has the supports Alice and others need. You want to know that you have economic mobility. You want to have quality education. You want to be in a community, if you're on the coast, that has coastal resilience. You also want to be focused on issues of equity, as well as being focused on our physical and mental well-being and health. So this dashboard has over 1,000 data points that you can look by all of the counties in coastal South Carolina to see how your county's numbers compare on specific data statistics, and then look at a project that you're doing. Because, there's a common phrase, you can't boil the ocean. But what you can do is something really significant for one family or one neighborhood or one community, and then have a benchmark to compare how you're moving that needle and know that you are making a difference. And, in addition to having this resource for the general public to use, we also use that for accountability for ourselves. For economic mobility, we're really leaning into it in a couple of ways. We're grant makers, so we are certainly always doing our grant making that we do twice a year. But one of the other things that we're doing is we're also leaning into impact investing. We think that combination of grant making and impact investing is a way that we can work on some short-term needs, but also look at what can we do to build multi-generational wealth. Because we don't want Alice just to be where she is month to month. We want Alice to be going generationally, getting out of the situation that those families are in. And the keys for that are housing, and what we see as small business development. We did an investment with the Opportunity Center in North Charleston. That was a significant investment of impact investing. It was about $800,000, but there is a small business administration center in there that in this past year has either done lending or grants of over $20 million for small businesses, minority businesses in our community. That's a data point for leverage. The same thing on the grant making side. We've partnered with Boeing as well as with South Carolina Community Loan Fund. Housing's a real issue. We also need to have some grant making to nonprofits who are helping families do owner-occupied home repair so they don't have to leave the homes they're in right now. So we're doing that along with some impact investing with Metanoia for some new affordable housing in North Charleston. So what I would say is we use data to see where there are needs, check our progress, and have those measurements for impact. But we're also doing a combination of Main Street investing as well as grant making to tackle some big issues with partners in the Tri-County.
All right, this one's back to you, Matt. In May, McMaster signed a state law allowing local government to use some accommodations tax for affordable housing. What are you hearing on the municipal level? Could that be a solution?
Yeah, this is a very good question, and it's great that they've set aside and allowed a tax to be used for housing and things like that. That will probably be more of a long-term solution because most of the local governments have already sort of programmed out what they're going to do with their accommodations taxes. And so the way it works for us, we have an application process. You go through, you have a panel, and you're given as a nonprofit a certain amount of money, and the town also already programs out some for its own uses. So that is a thing that won't change on a dime. It'll be sort of a long-term process change. I do think it will serve as gap funding for housing when it's appropriate. But I think there are a couple of other things, as I was considering this question, we could consider. The General Assembly has rejected inclusionary zoning as a thing that local governments can do. I think this can be something that could be a tool. It doesn't have to be a bludgeon, which I think the development community is worried about. I also think that local decisions should be made at the local level. So I think it could be something, inclusionary zoning or something called something else could be a tool to use that could be customized for the community. You guys also probably have read about Charleston County considering multi-county parks for affordable housing. And so what that means is, the bottom line is, it's a program that will help the development community reduce property taxes to make their pro formas work. So when you're out there, like in my day-to-day stuff, I hear developers talk about the cost of construction, the cost of taxes, cost of other pass-through things that they have to cover at the end of the day to pay back their note and make a profit. So if you're able to reduce taxes, that's something that will help a developer, and it's a lot more of a carrot than a stick, and it's been successful in other parts of the state. So I think a tax will be something that over the next decade will probably be programmed differently to help with affordable housing, but those are just a couple of ideas that came to mind about policy decisions that policymakers could think about moving forward.
Okay. Shawan, let's talk about children. So what have you seen to be the greatest barriers to healthy, happy childhoods? And what resources do our children need that remain unmet? What work have you seen being done in the community that's making impactful change?
So, again, children are people, right? I think one of the things that certainly I'm blessed to have had in my life are two awesome people who were awesome parents. Y'all tell them I said that, Thomas and Susie. Awesome people, awesome parents. And so I got to see modeled for me in our family unit how that looks. And my brother as well. My brother has a 2-year-old, and those things that we saw modeled that made us, we think, successful people, he now gets to model for my nephew. Well, not everybody got an opportunity to have that positive modeling. That doesn't mean they're any less deserving of it. And so I find those organizations that are particularly impactful for children are the organizations that help close that gap, that inequity gap, so that just because your parents didn't see it modeled, that doesn't mean they don't have the opportunity to close that gap so that their children can see positive modeling. Children's Trust of South Carolina, which is a quasi-state agency, I think does a great job. Obviously, trying to unite in a way that goes without saying. That's why we're here today. But helping parents be better parents. I think education, of course, is wildly important in a variety of different ways. So we've all heard of reading by third. So the idea is up until the 3rd grade, you are learning to read. After the 3rd grade, you are reading to learn. If you've never learned how to read, you're going to have a very difficult time in secondary school, post-secondary, learning, because you don't know how to read to learn. So COVID, I think it'll be incredibly interesting to see, particularly for Alice, what happens to those children who didn't have that formal education fence while mom and dad were working. And mom and dad are still working and working long hours and having a long commute. And now they have to come home, so that educational component is really at a deficit. And so how do we as a community band together to make that up for those children so that they're in adulthood, so that their opportunities are not limited, so that they too then fall into the cycle of being in Alice through no fault of their own, but simply because of the opportunities provided to them. So I think we need to be very mindful and intentional about what we're doing for our children in that respect as well.
All right, last question, and back to really my first question of how do we make a difference in the world? We can answer in whatever order you want. What is one thing you would suggest to everyone here today that they could do to support families in our community who are Alice?
See them. See them. Wendy Kopp, who is the immediate past chair of the Trident United Way Board, came into a board meeting, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and was flustered. She was flustered, and if any of you know Wendy, she's unflappable. And so it was kind of, it was a little wild to see, and she proceeded to tell us a story of being at the gas station, and a line is building at the gas station because this woman, who looked well dressed, is hogging the gas pump. So Wendy, being Wendy, goes up to her and realizes that the problem the woman is having is she's trying to get money out of a account into a card so that she can afford gas so she can go to work. And Wendy indicated that you would not look at this woman and think, geez, she's having trouble. But clearly she was. And it's really easy to let a nice looking dress or jacket fool you into making someone invisible. And so I think one of the greatest gifts we can give is to see people.
Well, I think that was the answer right there. But I mean, one of the things that I think is important about today is we need to reset what the perception of poverty and economic instability is in our region. And you'd never think that making $60,000 a year and being a college graduate would fit that. So that on its own today is very important. I think the other thing that I would really like to have as a takeaway is we have so many intersectional issues that deal with economic instability. It's housing, it's transportation, then there are education issues. And you start looking at all of these, and instead of being overwhelmed by that, I look at it as everybody has certain issues that really resonate with them. Some people are focused on education. Some people are going to say, I'm really interested in housing security. There is a place for you to follow your passion in almost any area that can support Alice families and others throughout this area. So what I would say is there is not any definite way you have to, go through to be helpful. You can follow your passion because this is something that affects every aspect of people's lives. And we're going to have to work together as individuals, nonprofits, governments, businesses, to really change the narrative of what's happening in our communities.
Mine's going to piggyback on that. It can be very overwhelming when you hear just the sheer number of things that are impacting Alice. But keep in mind, you don't have to do everything, but we each need to be intentional about doing something. And that something can make a significant impact. The Opportunity Center has been a blessing to our congregation because I knew about it, even though our members didn't, because they made sure to make sure that I knew about it so I could be a connector. I've got a member who is an entrepreneur who started a business and could not get a house because once you're an entrepreneur, for whatever reason, they don't accept those 1099s and that whole thing. They don't want to see that for a good few years. She was making more than she was when she was working a 9-to-5 for someone else. The Opportunity Center really helped her with her business plan, helped her with the tax side of things, understanding how to position herself so that she can become a homeowner. But we knew that because somebody came just to inform us. That was their job. That was their role. That was how they contributed. And as a result of that, we were able to build and broker that trust so that they could give the Opportunity Center a chance. So for each of us in here, you really have to sort through that in your own heart. You can't do everything, but there is something that you can be intentional about doing that can make more of an impact than you ever imagined it could.
Sure, I'll be brief. I was thinking about this, and I looked out, and I see so many great employers in here. And as somebody who grew up in a household that was at best in the Alice category, I think flexibility is something that folks in here who run companies can bake into their HR policies. Flexibility and grace. We've talked about a lot of things that can go wrong: childcare, transportation, all of those things, and people need the flexibility to miss a day or have a bad day, but still continue to be a valued part of your team. And so I think a lot about things like that as someone who serves as an ombudsman between the business community, government, the public, and I think flexibility and grace that are actual standardized policies in your companies.
If I could have the liberty to add one thing, Autumn. I'm looking at this panel up here, and it's not by accident. We have representatives of the business community, government, faith, as well as nonprofits. And it takes a whole community working together, but I love what Pastor Ben said about look at the position you're in and figure out where you are. If you're an employer, look at your benefits packages. It's not just a salary issue. If you can change the cost to someone for those benefits, you are lowering the Alice threshold. Think about your health care, transportation, technology, daycare, other factors that you could have there that could really make that easier for your lower paid employees. The second is if you are a nonprofit, I know many of you are in this community, let's come together and let's collaborate and see where we can all work together. There's no need to duplicate services, but let's all make sure that we are doing things that can help to lift up this group. And then the third one I'd say is that if you are in neither of those buckets and you're in the audience and you just want to help, volunteer time, go to our website, call 211, do another thing where you can get plugged in, or make a donation to a group that you feel is working within Alice, whatever that is, whether it's Trident United Way or another group you feel real comfortable and love.
All right, I have 4 questions from the audience, and I think we just answered one of them. It seems that increasing wages will not close the gaps for families. What else can we do as business owners? I think you had a great answer for that, unless you have anything you want to add.
There are other things too, like helping with down payments on homes. There are a number of benefits that you can offer, like dependent care packages, where that takes off of the taxable wages, but flex spending accounts. All of those kind of benefits really can help Alice.
All right. What is Trident United Way's commitment to DEI in regards to team, board, and programs?
It's a great question. We know that, one, Trident United Way is of, for, and by the community, and therefore we need to reflect the community when it comes to our staff as well as our board. And so we are working hard as we are hiring to make sure we are reflective of that community, and we will have that commitment to that. The second, when we look at our commitment to equity, is you look at the data, and you have to be working in that area. We have to be going where the needs are. And so we believe that we have to be doing things on multiple fronts, whether that's partnering with programs, directly working with individuals, or it's ultimately changing the systems and the underlying pieces of that and this way the society's rules and laws are set up. And so we're very, very, very committed to that simply because we're committed to helping all Alice families wherever they are.
Okay. All right, 2 more questions. What contributors categories are included in Alice Survival Budget, also known as the Alice Essential Index? It's an insider question.
So sorry, I'm now totally taking this over. The costs are essentially housing, food, healthcare, daycare, technology, which is usually a shock to people. Kids need to learn, they need access to technology. If you want to work, you have to have a phone or other ways of getting on. And then there's auxiliary costs that factor in there that are typically other things like transportation and other costs that may pop up that factor into there. And we'll be having a report that will be released in October, as I mentioned, which will list out all of these. It'll be broken out by demographics, it'll be broken out by region, and each county across the state. In addition to that, we'll be doing the quarterly reports, which will shine a very specific light on some of those underlying aspects every quarter. And so you have our commitment that will be a real focus for us in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, last question, then we're going to give out some awards. What are Trident United Way's priorities and goals for 2024 fiscal year? What ties to advocacy, and what can we do as individuals to support this work, especially advocacy?
Yeah, and advocacy is one where we've partnered with United Ways across the state to kind of look at what has been historical statewide issues. We're also going to be asking to others to join in. We're going to use the ALICE framework as a way to really tell the story, hopefully, in a way that isn't about Republicans or Democrats, that isn't about race or others. It's really just about helping where people are. And so on the ALICE site this fall, we'll be launching an advocacy tool that'll actually be mapped to each representative at the state level as well as federal, that'll tell the story of what are the demographics in their specific districts, since those look different than the county districts do, to be able to help to that story. And so anyone who's interested in a politically neutral way to help us tell that story, please join us. And our hope is that by working with cross sections of business, nonprofits, government, that we can go with a unified message that tells that story in a way that, again, crosses party lines and makes this really easy to help make the case as to why these issues need to be focused on. Does that answer that for you?
I think so. All right. If you asked a question through the QR code and it wasn't asked, someone will reach out to you to give you an answer. Now I'm going to turn it back to DJ to give some awards.
Thank you all to our panelists. Give them another round of applause. Thank you. Thank you all for submitting those questions. Your feedback and thoughts were wonderful to hear. I'd also like to take just a few quick seconds to thank a few key groups that are here in the audience. First, I would like to thank all the nonprofits in the room who are partners, who are doing incredible work. Please give them a round of applause for the work that they're doing every day tirelessly. Second, I'd like to say we've got a few mayors in the room that we just are really grateful for their attendance here. Mayor Pound from Isle of Palms, Mayor Murray from Hollywood, and Mayor Tecklenburg from Charleston. We're very honored for the partnership and the collaborations. And the last group I'd like to say is thank you to our board members. Would any board member we have for Trident United Way please stand up and just give them a quick round of applause? I'm sorry to put you on the spot, y'all. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Now I'd like to introduce you to Michael Samuel, who's our campaign cabinet chair and an incredible supporter and advocate for the community in Trident United Way. Michael has the honor of presenting our 3 awards today, and these are something special. Michael, thank you for all you do in the community and being with us today, and so please come up and join in.
Thank you, DJ. Our first award today goes for Outstanding Volunteer to Ms. Deb Campo. Deb is a longtime loyal Trident volunteer, having served in various roles including Board of Directors, Campaign Cabinet, Women United Steering Committee, Health Impact Council, Day of Caring Team Leader, Community Impact Community, Advancement Committee, Read Across America Day, a Women United Award recipient, and many more. Deb exemplifies the spirit of volunteer service, and on behalf of Trident United Way, I am honored to present her with the award of Outstanding Volunteer for 2023. Deb.
I really am honored to be recognized by an organization that is so volunteer-focused. I look around and I see a lot of volunteers I've been at tables with over the years and on job sites and on day of carings, and I know that there's a lot of volunteer spirit here. You know, the panel really made me realize why I've been involved so long with United Way. You know, you talk about how many ways we can get involved with helping Alice and all the community needs. And I think that's why I've liked United Way. I have a lot of broad interest and a very short attention span. And, there's always something new to learn, something new to get involved with, new people to team with, new collaborators. And so I think that's been the crux of 30, how rude of you to bring all those years up. Thank you very much.
Next, Try-United Way is pleased to present the Outstanding Nonprofit Partner of the Year Award to Our Lady of Mercy Community Outreach. Our Lady of Mercy Community Outreach has helped individuals and families in our local community navigate life's challenges for over 30 years. Their team exemplifies their mission of striving to build equitable communities and empower individuals to reach their full potential by providing basic and emergency needs, education, employment, and health services. Whether it is assisting families through their home repair program or workforce development program, Our Lady of Mercy Community Outreach has been here for the citizens of the Low Country. Jermaine Husser, Executive Director, will be accepting the award on behalf of his entire organization. Thank you again.
Good afternoon. We are honored to walk in the footsteps of giants. 30-plus years ago, extraordinary women, Sister Mary Joseph, Sister Carol, and so many others, created, thought of, and passionately went to the community of Johns Island and said, we want to make a difference. And we're honored to walk in your shoes. We work with an extraordinary team every single day and volunteers who give their heart and your passion for our work, and we thank you for allowing us to do that. The spirit of our sisters and our faith and what we want to make an impact in changing lives still lives there. Please come join us. Thank you.
Finally, I'm pleased to present the award for Outstanding Corporate Partnership to Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper and Try-United Way have a robust history of working positively to impact the Tri-County. Since 1934 and 1944, respectively, both organizations have worked in direct service to people of our community. Santee Cooper has long been one of Try-United Way's most valuable partners, with employee and corporate contributions of more than $6.5 million since 1999. Additionally, Santee Cooper employees have given thousands of hours of volunteer time in the community. Santee Cooper employees have also served on numerous Try-United Way committees and boards, including multiple terms as chair of board of directors. Jimmy Staten, President and CEO, will be accepting the award on behalf of his entire organization. Thank you again.
Thank you for the panel. That was y'all did an incredible job today. And then secondly, I wanted to just say thank you to Trident United Way. Thanks to the staff. Thanks for all that you all do for our community. And then lastly, but most importantly, the heart of Santee Cooper has always been its people. And I couldn't be more proud of them. And I'm even more proud of them today because you all have recognized them. So thank you very much for this. It's important that we are allowed to be a part of this incredible community. So thank you very much.
Thank you to all of our winners for your exemplary service for the Tri-County community. It's been an honor to recognize each of you here today.